Hello, I'm going to make you stare at my beautiful face and my exquisite mustache because I'm chaotically evil. But nothing is further from the truth than that statement, but of course, the age of visual appearances. You know, that's one of the descriptors that I'll come to a convention to, an agreement with other people, or a different way to describe the age of propaganda, personalized branding, and so on and so forth, which furthermore expands into hyper-individualization, and then individuality at all costs, which is the pathos of liberal democracy, and that's in that every individual can be exactly what they want for as long as it doesn't infringe on someone else's freedoms or of their person, which when I say of their person, I'm going to go on a legal conceptualization of that, in that you cannot infringe on their life, their livelihood, or their liberty, which again is a more American idealization, okay, and headspace versus collectivism or a commonwealth, which is the origin that is the country that I live in, which is Canada. Now, because of our shared history and then our social tapestry, we have so many arguments and land claims because of recorded and unrecorded history, in which oral tradition, and I'm not just talking about sucking dick or eating pussy. I'm talking about sitting around the campfire and listening to a historical narrative from an elder to a junior, right? Or to a tenderfoot. And the narratives having been destroyed is a reason for a motivation for historical revenge. In other words, this desire and this need to reestablish one's historical and family heritage. So this encompasses the land and language, and then the monuments, symbols, and rites and rituals. So this is where I've mentioned before that a moral relativism comes into play, and this idea, rather this desire for the exotic, and this lust, this sexual drive for something that is more diverse than one's own homogeneous and authoritarian culture. Because this is one of the other things that is something that you come to a conclusion of when you study history. And this is why there was such an effort to erase and destroy symbols and symbology, and then the mythos and the legends of our society. And this is something that, of course, whether you love them or hate them, is what Peterson talks about, and I'm talking about Dr. Jordan Peterson, you know, he did happen to write a thesis, and I'm going to look that up here. Let's see. Let's look at Jordan Peterson's doctoral thesis. If I can find it. 1990. Amazing, right? eScholarship.mcgill.ca in 1990. Potential psychological markers for the predisposition to alcoholism. Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. His abstract, again, this is hey Bernie, hey Bernie. I bet you had to work your ass off to get this together, and I bet that defense, your doctoral thesis meeting and your defense, whoa, I bet you were sweating fucking buckets, man. You have like 3 or 4 of your peers in front of you, and you have to defend what you're saying. Good Lord. You know, there's no pre-qualifiers and there's no substitute for knowledge or performance-based evaluations. This is the basis of our society and our democracy, because objectively speaking, some people's opinions and some people's knowledge is objectively and qualitatively more valuable than other people, and I'll put that in parallel to the elders of a tribe, okay, speaking around the campfire and communicating, with visual aids and the fire and costume and ceremonial garb and all this other stuff, to the Padawans even, or the tenderfeet, as I was saying, exactly the origin and the ethos, so the ethics and the cultural values of said tribe, so as to pass on the knowledge, right, and the understanding of one's collective identity. So moving on, this is again, I said I was going to read his abstract here, and it goes on like this. Sons of male alcoholics, somas, are at increased risk for the development of alcoholism and are apparently characterized by other abnormalities. It is possible that one or more of these abnormalities might serve as a marker for the alcoholic predisposition. Research describes in this thesis, conducted in the hopes of identifying such a marker, was designed, 1, to separate the relative pharmacological and psychological effects of acute alcohol intoxication upon neuropsychological functioning, 2, to investigate the neuropsychological functioning of somas with a multi-generational family history of male alcoholism, 3, to examine the relationship between somas, neuropsychological function, and their cardiovascular hyperreactivity to threat of and adverse stimuli, and 4, to investigate the relationship between a number of cardiovascular response patterns and voluntary weekly alcohol consumption. These studies are linked conceptually within the text of a general theory of information processing and action. So there you go. That's the synopsis of Dr. Peterson's thesis. And this is, you can understand exactly how he came to want to communicate to the tenderfeet exactly how things go wrong. And then you look, people are most interesting when no one knows who they are. That's a common thing, right? We love the story, the hero's journey, right? Someone goes through adversity and they're climbing up the hill, the Sisyphean task, and then all of a sudden they accomplish the impossible and they push the boulder over the hill. And little did they know that on the other side of the hill was this huge Leviathan, and the rock, that for which they were pushing up this hill, was the only thing that could destroy that Leviathan and bring peace to the land. That's the entire thing, right? And that's the meaning behind, in my interpretation, when you call someone over the hill, is because they've achieved a position in which they don't have to work anymore. But there's this generational conflict between the young and the old, because the older generation is established, and the younger one is trying to prove that it's worthy of having such power and control over so many resources, and also of the narrative, and then also of the psychology and the shared values and how we think and how we interact with each other, and so on and so on and so forth. And this is why it's so important to study psychology, and then why it's so important to read and then extrapolate from the incomplete data that is the works of culture of previous generations, and not too far back, but far back enough so that you still have a shared thread of this tapestry between you and the previous generations. So that's about 3 generations, right, to our grandparents. And expanding upon this, there was a serious effort, again, to undermine and to cut off the communication and the oral tradition, the storytelling, between my grandparents and my generation. So my generation being the millennials, and my grandparents being of the greatest generation, which is they were born and they fought in the Second World War. But if I remember correctly, the greatest generation describes those who were in the First World War. Those born between 1901 and 1927. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so my grandparents, they were born in the 30s. And they were in their early... okay, so late 20s. I don't remember exactly when my grandmother was born. I might have to ask my mother about this or something like that. But again, there's this drive with immigration to forget and to erase the mistakes and the tragedies and the crimes committed by previous generations somewhere else in the world, as they went from old sterile and barren lands to new fertile and fruitful lands. So that's, again, you're getting into sociology and anthropology and the ebb and flow and the cyclical nature of human existence. It's as complex as it is simple. It's a paradox. It really is. But once you come to understand that, then you start to see the patterns in which certain groups of humanity attempt to dominate and commandeer, right, the ship of human relationships, so that they can remain on top forever, right? But the immortality question or problem, right, of myth and legend is suicidal. It's suicidal. But the problem is that there are groups of humans that are much too inbred to reproduce. And so they've been scrambling for decades to find new and interesting ways to reverse the affects of their previous mode of thinking, which was that if they went ultra homogenous, that they would be of pure blood and of pure heart and pure of virtue, to the point for which they were sleeping with their own siblings. And again, there is things within our lives that are non-negotiable. And there are acts and actions and behaviors that are objectively morally irreprehensible. And I know that's a contradiction, right? Because moral means subjective, ethically means objective. So again, and they're ethically wrong, right? But we have this effort, especially at the cusp of millennials taking the baton of power. Say, like, we could call this the high water mark, okay? Fear and loathing instead of fear and loathing in Las Vegas, I want to call it fear and loathing in London, Ontario, because Western University within Canada was such a prestigious university, and it had such power within the Eastern schools, right? So I'm gonna throw, say, Dalhousie, McGill, U of T, and a few other honorable mentions, you know, for which would be considered to be like be on the same level as American Ivy League schools. I might even put Trent University in there because, you know, that's my university. And do you blame me? You know, going forward, right? The control of the cultural icons and of the role models even, and so then our idols, right? And not false idols, but the people for which we raise up to be the best examples of what we hold dear to our hearts and to our emotions. Now, when I say that, the heart and the emotion are two different things, because one is physical and one is metaphysical. Emotions are measurable, no doubt about that. But the cultural significance is metaphysical, in that we establish a different value, and then we try to argue over which emotions are more valuable than the other, and as to which of the sexes holds more emotional power or gravitas, or maybe they just have tatas. But I don't want to be known just for my tits. Well, you know what, honey? You better get your nose in a book, because that's the only way you're getting out of that one. Ugh. Anyways, that is in no way reference to any particular individual, even though I might be thinking of someone right now. Oh man. Oh man. How many big titty librarians do you know? Not very many, eh? Oh my goodness. Oh, he's being a misogynist. Wow, I can't believe how unattractive he is. Okay. But what I was going to really get into after this huge preamble of 20 minutes is I've been watching Airwolf, and Airwolf is a television series from the middle 80s. So let me look this up. And it had, so like the tagline, let's look at this. Not from Wikipedia, I'm going to use the IMDb, is as part of a deal with an intelligence agency to look for his missing brother, a renegade pilot goes on missions with an advanced battle helicopter. And there was 4 seasons. Yeah, that's right, 4 seasons. It was a cultural moment, especially as Western civilization was competing, of course, with Eastern civilization for the supremacy, like ultimate supremacy over the future, so to speak, something abstract and egotistical of humanity itself. And what direction are we going in? We going the hyper individualist, or we're going into the hyper collective? Which of this hyper drama are we gonna fuck with, right? Because the human mind doesn't seem to be able to process anything more than a binary computer when it comes down to it, right? A yes or a no. The majority of us are not that smart. We're not that intelligent. And we cannot reason our way out of a paper bag, not without someone telling us, right? We have been domesticated, right? There has been a domesticator of our behavior and all of this, and our teeth have been removed, and we've become less wild, right? That's the whole point of civilization, is for all of us to become gentleman and lady. In other words, we're of provenance, and we don't get into physical conflicts. We fuck with each other psychologically, to the point for which we torture entire civilizations to get what we want. Okay, so there is, again, yes, it was 4 seasons. There's 24 episodes per season, so it's a lot to get through. I would consider this to be my current assignment, or at least one of them, is to get through all of this, and to see exactly what kind of nonverbal communication is being put through all of this, because there are firms and agencies that have been employing soft disclosure on a regular basis in order to communicate to those who are able and willing to extrapolate from the incomplete data something that might be considered schizoid, or conspiracy theory, but it isn't, and that's the beauty of the internet, is that you can have every piece of information that you want, and then you can have too much information or misinformation, and it can be seriously overwhelming. But if you give yourself enough time and you have enough confidence, then you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out, because there's nothing new under the sun, and the similarities amongst cultural narratives are very similar to each other, and again, that's one of the faults and one of the not one of the illusions, but one of the conveniences come to one of the conclusions of convenience that we come to in order to establish a shared ground, right? So there's nothing lost in translation, because another thing that you learn through psychology is that the linguistics organize our brains. So how we speak and what we speak determines our paradigm of thought and how we reason things out. So this is just one of those things that you have to learn to deal with. And that's life, right? That's life. I don't know how to speak Chinese. I don't know how to read it. I'm not really interested in learning it. Either Cantonese or Mandarin. Maybe if someone paid me a few $1 million to go live there for a while, and but then again, money ain't worth shit if you're dead. So what am I getting at here? Well, I'm watching this, and then this was a high-tech show, right? And it's really campy, it's cheesy, it's pure 80s, right? I got the theme song stuck in my head right now. And it's very easy to understand because, again, the audience the majority of them, did not have access to post-secondary education, right? A high school education in the 80s would get you a nice job in a union that would afford you enough income to buy a house and to buy a car and be happy, right? You could pop out a bunch of Rugrats and then you'd be okay. That was the idea, right? That was the idea. But then we started circle jerking over a bunch of different ideological functions and logic problems, and debates over whether or not putting a penis in another man's asshole was socially acceptable. Now, again, this is a political thriller, right? It's about this man who just wants his family and wants to be left alone. They describe Stringfellow Hawk as a loner. The strong but silent type. He's an alpha male. He's a prototypical alpha male. And it's funny, he's like supposed to be 33 years old. He's attractive, right? He has redeemable qualities, and he's disagreeable, right? You don't get anywhere in life by bending over backwards and pleasing other people, right? If you're always agreeable, then you're irrelevant. You'll be forgotten. This is something that I wrote on the wall in prison, is that I would rather be disagreeable than wrong. And that's a strong thing to say, right? That's a strong, absolutist, concrete thing to say. Because if I'm going to extrapolate or expand upon that, if you're disagreeable, you have authority, even though you might be wrong. But if you're wrong, then everyone is in agreement. So it's agreeable that you are wrong. And there's shame involved in that. And there's social repercussions involved in that, especially if you get it wrong repeatedly. And then also, that infers that, the lie repeated often enough becomes the truth. Or the inverse, which is if the truth is repeated often enough, then it becomes a lie. Which is, that's a paradox, right? We're full of paradoxes. Paradoxes. So, the Airwolf is sponsored by a shadowy government agency. Again, they call the firm, which for me is just an analog for the CIA. Because it is American, and they call the CIA the agency, or in the 80s, the NSA was not referred to, right? No such agency, it didn't exist, or it's a liaison agency between all of these in order to stand in the middle of all these intergovernment intergovernment agencies in the onion, or say the Pentagon within the Pentagon within the Pentagon, which is, again, that's a symbology of the inner circle, the larger circle, and then the expanded circle of relationships, and then also of knowledge, right, and so on and so forth, and this intrigue and subterfuge and this intelligence and counterintelligence game that they play with each other, between having, because it's like having so it's like having the Maltese Falcon. Okay, so you have this thing, you have this narrative device that for which everybody wants, but only a few people know its true meaning, right? And so the people are fighting over it, or it's like the briefcase that in Pulp Fiction that nobody knows what's inside it, right? Or it could be a Fabergé egg, it could be Van Gogh's ear, or it could be something else that is seriously valuable. Let's see. If I were to expand on this more, it's just this symbol of power, and of freedom, and this dominance game, in which, haha, you can't catch me, the cat and mouse thing going on in this, and again, like I said, that Stringfellow Hawk, he's in his 30s. He's supposed to be like 32 or something like that. And this came to a cusp of relevance, because they typecast the character as a Vietnam pilot, then who lost his brother in Vietnam on some mission, and so he has this complex, this psychological complex, where he's mysterious and he's distant. He holds everyone at arm's length because he doesn't want them to die. He doesn't want them to get hurt like his brother, and so on and so forth. So he hangs out in this cabin in say Northern California, near mountainous region in the anticline, with his blue tick coonhound and his cello, right, serenading eagles. It's very picturesque, and he's got this like blue steel expression on his face all the time, like what is he thinking? What's it like to be him? Women want him, and men want to be like him, so on and so forth. And he doesn't get involved in a lot of relationships because he has something that's more important to him than having a family. And it's not like the series puts women in this harmless damsel, or they're this helpless damsel in distress. What's it, the trope, right? Again, there was we were extremely, well, not me, but the leftists, and say like feminist frequency was extremely critical of stuff like this, because it wasn't our culture, it was our parents' culture, and what our parents wanted was a distraction and a fantasy. They wanted something to strive for. But that's the thing that the feminist frequency got wrong in their efforts to demystify and to what's it demystify and to I hope you know where I'm going with this, because I'm losing it right now. I'm getting tired after 35 minutes. Explaining that this battle over fertility, security, and narrative is exactly where we're at in 2025. And again, this baton. Okay, so Stringfellow has his father's best friend, which is Dominic Santini, Santini Air. I know of another Santini, and they run a gallery. And tangentially from this, recently the Arts Project here in London blocked me on Facebook because I have this spat going on with a female artist who happened to have won the Polaris Prize, but she's been handed everything hand over fist because she's an immigrant from Colombia, and because she supports this new wave of cultural acceptance and diversity and inclusion and so on and so forth, and is very aggressive towards people that don't agree with her or her friends. And that's unfortunate because, as I was saying earlier, eventually, diversity and inclusion ultimately means homogeny and exclusion, because it's an effort to differentiate from the previous generation and establish a new collective identity. And this again has to do with our monkey brains and our inability to deal with anything more abstract than the concrete binary of yes and no. And it becomes this game of intellectual circle jerk and masturbation, in which we attempt to manipulate each other into accepting the ugliness of humanity, no matter what the cost. And that's the antithesis to me of something like Airwolf, in which there are no compromises. It's either there's either an intervention, or there's some international incident that happens because they didn't intervene in a gray area where larger powers cannot act, because if they do, they mobilize this huge machine that ends up annihilating itself. It becomes a situation of mutually assured destruction. So they have to go about these tactical missions of great importance, great accuracy, and stealth. So I'm just about to break 40 minutes here. And I'll leave it at that. And then what my conclusion to all of this is that, we live in interesting times, and my generation is going through this midlife crisis, and I'm not the only one to observe this. And this recognition that we're not young anymore, and that there are real and true consequences that are immediate. They're not just 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years down the road. They're immediate. And once the people that were fighting for this power have achieved a position of importance and of what they desired, they are now panicking because they've come to realize what they sacrificed in and what they were told wasn't worth it. You know, this is one of the things that's actually the last episode, Fight Like a Dove, that I happen to have watched. In which the plot line is that a father and daughter duo, they're Jewish, and they go about hunting down, Nazi war criminals to bring them to justice. And of course, she forgoes having children. And then, Archangel says to her, "You've given up the best years of your life for this. Was it worth it?" And she says that it was. But she had a choice in the matter. She had a choice. Whereas Stringfellow Hawk, doesn't have a choice. Because if he doesn't do what he's doing, then larger, more problematic things happen. And that's the difference between being a man and being a woman. Is that the choices that men make lead to annihilation, and the choices that women make lead to destruction. I think that's a good way to end this. I encourage you, if you have the time, to watch Airwolf. I'm not saying there's some secret messages in it or anything like that, but there could be. You know, this is what entertained my parents. It's what entertained your parents. What entertained me, even though I only knew of it in reference sometimes. As a child, and it was a cultural moment in which the technology and the motivation and the inspiration and the perspiration all united into this one small screen weekly event for 4 years, or however long it took for them to produce it. And that's something special, you know. That's movie magic, as the industry people would put it. So that's that. You know, I can see my phone acting up a little bit and being funny. So yeah, don't get drunk on your own booze, your own bathtub gin. Don't get high on your own supply. That's a stupid thing to end this. I don't know what I'm going to call it, but anyways, thanks for tuning in on this rant. We'll see you next time. Focus, you fuck.